Okay, so now to the things you've all been waiting for. You'll hear the applications, the first of which is 15 Madison Street, block 28.03, lot 52 in the R4 zone, and it carries the case number Z1616387V. What I'll do is to get Mr. Bridger to read the essence of his memorandum into the record, and then I'll ask you to present your case.
Thank you. Mr. Bridger, before you begin, I just want to note the noticing is in order and the board has jurisdiction to hear the application. We'll swear you in for the evening. You swear affirm your testimony this evening will be truthful.
Yes, I do. Thank you. Good evening. The applicants, Stephen and Jenny Gilbert, are the owners and applicant, 15 Madison Street. They are seeking hardship C1 variance and in the alternative a C2 to permit the construction of a rear deck in exception to the required building coverage and the smaller combined side yard setbacks. Subject property is located in the R4 zone and is subject to the use and bulk regulations in accordance with sections 17A, 254, and 255 of the former Princeton Borough Land Use Ordinance. The existing single-family use is permitted as of right. The subject lot is non-compliant with respect to lot area. The requirement is 6,000 square feet. The existing is 4,205 square feet. It's also non-compliant with lot width. The requirement is 60 feet, and the existing is 29 feet. Subject property is non-compliant with respect to the following bulk requirements. The required side yard setback, smaller side yard setback is 8, the existing is 4.1, and the combined side yard setback requirement is 20, whereas the existing is 9.5 feet. The applicant is proposing to construct a 15 by 18.5 deck structure on an existing gravel area. There's the house right here, and these would be the setbacks, these yellow markouts, if he complied with the setbacks. The deck will feature side planters and storage area underneath for lawn equipment and trash receptacles. The proposed deck requires the following variances. The smaller side yard requirement is 8 feet, and the proposal is 5 feet and 3/4 inches. The combined side yard requirement is 20. The proposed is 10 feet 6 inches, and the required building coverage is 30%, and the proposed is 31. They requested consideration under both the C1 and the C2 criteria. I'd be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Do we have any questions, Mr. Bridger?
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Bridger. We presumably can take cognizance of this case because all of the correct documents have been filed.
Yes, I think I said that before I swore in, Mr. Bridger, but if I didn't, I apologize. Absolutely.
If you did, I didn't hear. Sir.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, everyone, board professionals. For the record, my name is Bob Rodolfi. I'm an attorney with offices in Pennington, Hopewell Township, and I'm here before you this evening representing the interest of Steve Gilbert and his wife, Jenny Hartshorn. Steve is seated to my right, Jenny's to my left. We also have we'll have the testimony of Jim Kyle, who's a licensed planner with the state of New Jersey. He will address the planning considerations for you in support of this application. Mr. Bridger has taken most of the thunder out of my preliminary remarks. I would just like to emphasize that of all the variances that are made for this application, only 3 are occasioned by what the Gilberts want to do in the back of their house with respect to the construction of a deck. There are 5 variances which are existing non-conforming situations that would be there if we didn't do anything. The property is known as Lot 52 in Block 2803, and it's located in your R4 zoning district. We've taken the time to review Mr. Bridger's memorandum dated September 22nd of this year. Also in my file, and I think in your file, I received a copy of a letter from a neighbor in support of the application, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, and that's dated October 11th, 2016, but there's no additional correspondence of which I am aware. So with that brief introductory presentation, I'm ready to prepare and have my client testify and provide evidence and introduce some exhibits for your review.
So maybe if both of them are going to testify, they should be sworn by our attorney, and then we can proceed without interruption.
That'd be fine. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Would you raise your right hand, both of you?
Right hand, just-
Do you swear affirm your testimony this evening will be truthful?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Did you have Mr. Kyle sworn in at the same time, or we missed him? He's our planner.
We will accept his qualifications, and
Well,
he
wait,
can
wait.
swear to be truthful when he arrives on...
Or what?
Sworn in later?
Yeah.
Okay, fine. Right. Steve? Yeah, but you won't testify. Gotta turn this off. Okay. Steve, you and Jennifer are the applicants for this application, correct?
Yes.
And you currently reside at 15 Madison?
Yeah.
And how long have you lived there?
Just under a year.
And you've just completed extensive interior renovations of this property rather than knocking it down, correct?
That's correct.
All right. And you're here this evening to seek permission that would allow you to construct a small deck at the rear of your house. Is that correct?
Yes.
Could you briefly explain to the board in your own words what you and Jen want to do with the deck?
Well, there was a large deck that was there before, and that deck had to be taken down because it was in poor condition. And in our renovating this house, we actually rebuilt the back porch area, or back three-season area, and incorporated it into the house. It was made smaller than what was there originally. So the footprint of the house today is smaller than was there 12 months ago. And in doing that, we had to take down the existing deck. The only deck that we have right now that's permissible under the guidelines is probably about the width of this table. And it's a 4-foot drop, and it's quite steep. And so the purpose of this is not only to give us some outdoor space, but is to make it much more easy transition to get down to the ground.
See, I'm going to hand you a color photograph that was taken by you, I believe. And as I asked the board attorney or the board secretary to mark this as Exhibit A1, I'd also like to have Mr. Bridger distribute copies of the photograph to the board for their review at the same time.
Thank you.
Mr. Rodolphe, you want us now to mark these as Exhibit A1
A1 and A2.
and A2, and then your client will identify what they are?
Exactly.
Okay.
Okay. Well, your days of printed as a lot better than many of the pictures we've had submitted to us for this meeting.
Thank you.
Many of which are uniformly obscure.
Hey, Steve, would you please identify and confirm with the board what Exhibit A1 depicts?
This is the view from Yolan Arlette's house, our neighbor to our north side. And this is a view of the garbage and recycling cans that we're hoping to corral and enclose in a cabinet as part of this design.
Okay. And likewise, Exhibit A2, could you please describe that for the board?
Well, this would be the view from Fran and George Neville's house to our immediate rear. And again, it shows the garbage cans that we're trying to hide. It also, I think, demonstrates the narrowness of this property and demonstrates for you the width of the deck that, is all we're permitted. We want to do this for safety of grandchildren and pets, and what we have there is not safe, in our opinion.
And you've submitted drawings of your deck so that the board has a very clear idea what the deck would look like from the left side of the house and then the right side of the house as well as the rear property,
Yes,
correct?
that's right. There's a perspective and then elevations.
Now, in your opinion, will this be a betterment for the property, enhance the value of the property?
Slightly more into the microphone.
Sure. Is it your testimony, Steve, in your opinion, that these improvements will enhance and better the property compared to what's there now?
Yeah, not only our property, I believe my neighbors' properties as well.
Okay. Now, before you filed this application, did you have an opportunity to review your plans with any of your neighbors?
Yes, we've talked to 8 neighbors, including all that were immediately adjacent, and a couple are here tonight. And, received nothing but supportive comments, some concerns which we addressed, but certainly no negative comments. We made it very clear that we're respecting the easement that is between us and our neighbor where there's a common driveway, and that we're not making any changes whatsoever to the parking, which was, a concern. You may recall there were some concerns in the past about this with trees, but not only are we going to keep all the trees that are in there, we're going to be adding more screening as part of this project, including screening as part of the deck. Part of the deck will not just be space that you can walk on. It's going to be planters to provide screening for the neighbors of this.
And on the other side of the deck, the screening and cabinetry along the Yolan side of the deck will hide all of these containers, correct?
That's right, with sliding doors, nothing that will swing open and complicate access or ingress to the property.
There will be a step down from the living area to the deck.
Yes, there'll be
Single step.
two steps down as a transition, and then another few steps from that to the actual, what is going to be the parking pad.
All right, I can see that more or less on the plan.
Now, Steve, this is a very tight, small lot, is it not?
Yes.
And could you confirm to the board that this is the minimum you believe will be necessary, and taking everything, all the circumstances into consideration, that this will meet your needs, and it's really the minimum that you need?
Yes, I mean, we actually had proposed something bigger, and in our discussions with Derek, we really made an effort to cut it down already. So it's not like we haven't, thought through all the possibilities here, and this is really the smallest deck that we could probably make work for our purposes and be able to provide what we're trying to do for the neighbors with the screening and the cabinetry for the garbage cans.
Okay, let's wind up by discussing or telling the board what materials will be used in the construction of the deck.
Cedar and perhaps some composite woods. Our thought is for the cabinetry is to use some kind of composite wainscoting that would be painted to match the house. But all good materials.
Right, and the intent is so that the structure, the proposed structure, the rear deck, will blend in aesthetically with the existing structure.
Yes.
Okay. I have no further questions of the applicant at this point, Mr. Chairman.
The question of screening, as far as the neighbors are concerned, if I understand the diagrams we've got, there is a fairly high, I think it's a trellis structure along either side of the deck.
On the south side, right.
I'm sorry?
On the south side? South side of the
On
deck.
the south side only?
Right. Yes.
Yes. Okay. The other thing that always concerns me in confined spaces is the issue of lighting. And my normal request is that if you put lighting on the deck, which you have to do anyhow because you're coming out of the house onto it, the light source not be visible from the neighboring properties, and no light spillage goes from those light sources across your formal lot line.
Right, that's correct.
So that would be a condition that I would add should we grant the variance.
And you'd be willing to comply with that condition?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Do other members of the board have questions? So why don't you?
Okay, great. Our next witness is Jim Kyle, our planner. Jim, could you come up and be sworn?
I would try and sit at the table. That is a portable microphone if they won't lend you one of theirs.
So I can poke him.
Mr. Kyle, for the record, your last name is spelled K-Y-L-E?
Correct.
And do you swear or affirm your testimony this evening will be truthful?
I do.
Thank you.
Mr. Kyle, would you please state your profession?
Sure, I'm a professional planner with offices in Hopewell, New Jersey.
Are you licensed to practice your profession in the state of New Jersey?
I am.
And how long have you been a licensed planner?
Since 2001.
And have you both in your practice represent private individuals like the Gilberts as well as municipalities?
I do.
Can you give the board just a brief resume of your educational and professional background so the board's comfortable with your background?
Sure, I have a Bachelor of Science in Environmental Planning and Design from Rutgers, which I received in 1996. I've been practicing for 20 years, licensed for 15 of those. I've appeared before over 170 boards in the state. Currently represent about 6 or 7 municipal clients in Hunterdon and Warren counties, also a couple in Somerset County as well. So I actually do a lot of municipal work in addition to representing private homeowners like Steve and Jenny.
I submit that...
We have no problems with the qualifications, so we should get on.
I didn't know what nodding your head to the side meant.
That means I've had enough. We will do it.
Thank
It's a
you.
good sign. Thank you very much. Jim, have you familiarized yourself with Princeton's land use ordinance and its master plan?
I have.
And you're familiar with the site and the neighborhood?
I am.
Have you ever personally visited the site?
A few times, yes.
All right. And have you taken the time to review Derek's, Mr. Bridger's memorandum reviewing this application?
I have.
And you are familiar with all the details of this application?
I am, yep.
All right. Could you please review with the board the analysis of your investigation and the foundation for the board to have enough information which to approve this application?
Sure. So I think Mr. Bridger identified the existing non-conforming conditions, so I won't waste any more time going through those. I think the 3 variances that we're here for this evening are the smaller side yard setback, 8 feet is required where 5 3/4 is proposed. The combined side yard setback, 20 is required, 10 feet 6 inches is proposed. And then lot coverage, building lot coverage, 31% is proposed where a maximum of 30% is permitted. So we have a 1% exceedance proposed, and that's related to the construction of the deck. Jumping right into the testimony on and I'll address the side yard setbacks separately from the coverage, because I think the side yard setbacks can clearly meet the C1 criteria where a hardship exists. So the lot width here is 29 feet where 60 is required. So to apply the side yard setback requirements to a lot of this width is practically difficult. As you see from the drawings that we submitted, the red dashed line represents the area that would be a permitted building envelope on this lot, and it really only amounts to about 9 feet where you could construct something reasonably. So I think it's pretty easy to demonstrate that a hardship exists. And Mr. Bridger raised a good point in his memo about the character of this lot compared to others. So if this was a typical situation for the R4 zone, then it might be something where we'd want to change the zoning. But looking at the characteristics of the lots generally here, these are some of the narrower lots. So 29 feet for a detached single-family home is pretty narrow. So there's other lots that are narrower, but they have different types of dwelling units on them. So generally when you look in the R4 zone, there's lots that are considerably larger than this, and this is kind of on the smaller side in terms of width. So I think this is really something that's, while there's certainly lots that are this narrow on this street, the vast majority are wider. So it's somewhat unique to this, and there's kind of a small range of parcels that have this condition. So I think we can demonstrate that a hardship exists. In terms of the negative criteria, I don't think there would be any substantial detriment to the surrounding properties. The deck is inset from the full width of the house, so we're not seeking to have that deck go to the outside wall to outside wall. We've actually brought that in several inches on either side, so we're not going all the way out to, and won't be any closer to the properties than the existing house is. The setback here is sought for an area that's not much higher than the finished first floor of this. So we do have the lattice work that's going to run on the south side, which is intended to screen that southern lot. But generally speaking, the mass of this structure is all at the finished first floor and lower. So most of it's hidden from the surrounding properties. There's also some evergreens that are, some arborvitae that have been planted in the last few years. They're on that southern side. And I keep referencing the southern side because that's really the house that's closest. The house to the north is across the driveway and a little bit farther away. So I think the greatest area of concern is likely the house to the south. So we have existing trees that are there that are going to continue to get larger and will eventually fill in and provide a fairly substantial screen to that house to the south. In terms of the impact of the intent purpose of the zone plan, I think, setbacks are typically something that are intended to address adequate light, air, and open space and provide adequate separation here. As I said, not much of the structure rises above the finished first floor here, so we're not asking for setback relief for a two-story addition that's going to have this mass that's, visible to the neighbors. Most of it's going to be below and out of sight, and we're also providing additional screening. So I think here in this case, we're providing adequate separation and it won't substantially impact the surrounding property, so there's no substantial impairment to that intent of providing those setbacks. Addressing the coverage variance, I think this one qualifies as a C2 and that the purposes of zoning are promoted and the benefits outweigh the detriments. I think it promotes purpose A, public health, safety, and welfare, and also purpose I, to promote a desirable visual environment. So it's meant to provide some outdoor space for Steve and Jenny, but it's also intended, as Steve said, to address this issue of the refuse cans and some, rakes and shovels and things that are kind of at the rear of the property now that we want to get out of sight of the neighbors. So I think there's a visual benefit to the neighbors in terms of the grant of the variance here for the coverage to allow the deck, and then, as we said, it ties in nicely with the architecture of the house. We're going to paint everything to match. So overall, we think it's an improvement and that the benefits outweigh the detriments. But I think the other thing that we have to prove here is the negative criteria. Looking at the impact of the coverage variance to the neighbors, the decking will have spaces in between so that water can infiltrate to the bottom. So the stone surface that's there now will remain below that. So there's going to be infiltration. So it's not as though the water's going to hit the deck and run off onto the corners. It'll infiltrate the surface and then get underneath the deck and get into the ground as it does today. So we're not, technically while we're increasing the building coverage, we're not really covering that surface with something that's impervious, because that water will eventually get down to the ground. We're really talking about a de minimis increase, 1%, which on this lot size equates to about 42 square feet of increase, so it's relatively minor. So again, we don't feel there's any substantial impact from that increase to any of the neighboring properties from increased runoff or anything like that. No real stormwater management concerns on that regard. And then in terms of the intent and purpose of the zone plan, I think coverage is generally intended to be twofold. It addresses, first of all, stormwater management requirements, but also to guard against an overdeveloped appearance on a property. So you want to regulate how much of that building coverage is there. And I think, as I said, we'll have infiltration that will occur to the deck, so there's really no concern there. And again, the increase that we're seeking is de minimis, 42 square feet over what's permitted. So I don't think it will rise to the level of substantially impacting the intent that's behind that impervious cover limitation. So I think that the board would be justified in granting the variances that are requested for the reasons stated.
Do you think this proposed deck is an improvement to the residents?
It is, because we're taking this structure that's at the rear. We're going to be able to hide most of the garbage cans. There's no shed, there's no garage on this property, so there's really no place to put items like that. So I think overall, there is a benefit to Steve and Jenny, but as Steve said, this is really twofold. They're trying to provide some benefit to the neighbors in getting those unsightly items out of the way and getting them under cover.
There are two outdoor parking spaces in the back of the lot, is that right?
That's correct.
They will not be interfered with by...
Not at all.
They will not.
Room for 3 cars.
The room for 3 cars.
Yeah, there's adequate separation between where the deck is proposed and those parking spaces, so no impact to the neighbor's ability to access their parking as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Any members
Thank
of the board have questions?
Okay. Thank you.
Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to address this case?